Bethesda, Maryland, 1976. An idyllic American suburb where nothing ever seems out of place. But one spring evening, a horrific crime would shatter this peace. In a tidy house on a quiet street, 5 members of the Bishop family were brutally murdered, and the man believed responsible, husband and father William Bradford Bishop, vanished without a trace. This is the story of an American dream life turned into a nightmare, and a mystery that has perplexed investigators for decades. William Bradford Bishop, or Brad to those who knew him, seemed to have it all: education, prestige, and a loving family. Born in 1936 in Pasadena, California, Bishop was bright and ambitious. He earned a degree from Yale University and a master's from Middlebury College, became fluent in 5 languages, and served in U.S. Army counterintelligence. By the late 1960s, he was a Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department, holding posts in Italy, Ethiopia, and Botswana. During those years abroad, he and his wife Annette had 3 sons, William III, Brenton, and Jeffrey. In 1974, the Bishops settled back in the United States, moving to a comfortable home in the Washington, D.C. suburb of Bethesda, Maryland, joined by Brad's elderly mother, Lobelia. On the surface, the Bishops were an all-American family. Brad Bishop was an athletic outdoorsman and a hard-working diplomat. Annette was pursuing her passion for art, the boys were active in school, and Lobelia doted on her grandchildren. But all was not entirely well behind the scenes. Brad Bishop suffered from insomnia and depression, for which he had been under psychiatric care. Colleagues would later recall that he was intense, self-absorbed, and under pressure, both at work and at home. In early 1976, Bishop was reportedly frustrated with his desk job and eager for another foreign posting, a move his wife was reluctant to make. Tensions were quietly mounting in the Bishop household, setting the stage for the tragedy to come. March 1, 1976 began like any other day. Bishop, then 39 years old and working at the State Department, went to the office as usual. That afternoon, he learned that he had been passed over for a promotion, a stinging disappointment. Clearly upset, Bishop left work early. He stopped by his bank to withdraw $400 in cash, then purchased a gas can and a heavy sledgehammer at a hardware store. As dusk fell, he returned to his Bethesda home with dark intentions. Investigators believe the massacre began sometime between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Inside the house, Bishop's wife Annette was likely attacked first, struck with the hammer and killed. His 68-year-old mother Lobelia was murdered next, bludgeoned as she returned from walking the family dog. Finally, Bishop crept upstairs to the bedrooms where his 3 sons, ages 5, 10, and 14, lay sleeping, and brutally bludgeoned each of them to death in their beds. In a matter of minutes, 5 innocent lives have been violently snuffed out. The walls and floors of the home were left splattered with blood, a scene of unimaginable horror hidden behind the Bishop's front door. With his entire family dead, Bishop set about covering up the crime. He gathered the bodies of his wife, mother, and children into his maroon 1974 Chevrolet station wagon. Sometime late that night, he drove south, leaving the quiet streets of Bethesda behind and heading towards North Carolina. The trip was roughly 275 miles, or about 5 hours, giving Bishop plenty of time alone with the consequences of his actions. In the early hours of March 2nd, Bishop arrived in a remote, densely wooded swamp area near Columbia, North Carolina. Under the cover of darkness, he dug a shallow pit in the soft earth. There, in a crude grave, he piled the bodies of his family. He doused them with gasoline from the can he had bought and set them ablaze. The fire's glow against the trees was meant to erase his crimes. With the corpses burning, Bishop fled the scene. Later in the day, The makeshift gravesite drew the attention of a nearby park ranger who noticed smoke rising in the swamp. Investigating the source, the ranger made a ghastly discovery: the charred remains of 5 bodies in a smoldering pit. Scattered around were clues: a shovel and pitchfork with labels from a Montgomery County hardware store in Maryland, and an empty gas can. The local authorities were immediately notified, but at that moment they had no idea who the victims were, or that their killer was already long gone. Back in Bethesda, several days passed with no sign of the Bishop family. Neighbors grew concerned. The family's car was gone, mail was piling up, and the house seemed eerily silent. On March 8th, worried friends contacted local police, urging them to check on the Bishops. 2 days later, on March 10th, a Montgomery County detective entered the home on Brook Drive and immediately sensed something was wrong. He found traces of blood on the front porch and more blood inside the front hall and bedrooms. This was now a confirmed crime scene. Investigators soon matched the dental records of the North Carolina bodies to the missing Bishop family. The horrifying puzzle came together. The victims in the shallow grave were Annette, Lobelia, and the 3 boys, and the only person missing was Brad Bishop himself. A massive manhunt was launched for Bishop. With the discovery of the brutal slayings, an arrest warrant was issued, and Brad Bishop was officially a fugitive wanted for 5 counts of first-degree murder. The FBI quickly joined the search, additionally charging him federally with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Law enforcement agencies across the country were alerted to be on the lookout, but Bishop had a significant head start. The murders had occurred over a week before the bodies were identified, giving him ample time to slip away. Then came a crucial break. On March 18, 1976, nearly 3 weeks after the murders, investigators found Brad Bishop's car. His Chevrolet station wagon was discovered abandoned at an isolated campsite in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in eastern Tennessee, over 400 miles from the makeshift grave. Inside the vehicle, police uncovered chilling evidence. They found blood-soaked blankets and tarps, a shotgun, an axe, dog biscuits and a dog leash, maps and travel guides, and even Bishop's prescription medication in a shaving kit. The spare tire well in the trunk was caked with blood, grim proof that the car had been used to transport the bodies. Notably, Bishop's family dog, a golden retriever named Leo, was nowhere to be found, but witnesses later reported that Bishop had the dog with him in the days after the murders. The location of the car suggested Brad Bishop had fled into the wilderness. The campsite was near the Appalachian Trail, a sprawling 2,000-mile footpath stretching from Georgia to Maine. Authorities theorized that the seasoned outdoorsman might have deliberately merged into the flow of backpackers and hikers to conceal his escape. Bloodhounds were brought in and picked up Bishop's scent on a trail leading away from the campsite, but the scent was soon lost. Despite intensive search efforts in the Smoky Mountains, scouring trails, canvassing locals, and circulating Bishop's description, there was no sign of the fugitive diplomat. It was as if William Bradford Bishop had evaporated into the misty mountain air. Brad Bishop had proven to be disturbingly adept at evading capture. Investigators quickly realized they were not dealing with an ordinary criminal on the run, but someone with training and careful planning. Bishop's background in counterintelligence and foreign service raised an alarming possibility. He might have used his skills and connections to flee overseas. He had approximately a week of lead time before authorities even knew a crime had been committed. During that period, Bishop could have easily traveled far from the East Coast. In fact, the FBI noted that his State Department passport was never recovered, opening the door to speculation that he may have used a diplomatic passport to leave the country shortly after the murders. In the pre-digital era of 1976, with fewer interagency databases, an international escape was plausible, especially for a man fluent in French, Italian, Spanish, and Serbo-Croatian. Over the ensuing years, reported sightings of Bishop trickled in from all over the world. He was a man without a known alias or obvious motive, but many believed he was out there living under a new identity. Numerous tips placed him in various European countries: Italy, Belgium, England, Finland, the Netherlands, Germany, Greece, Spain, Sweden, and even Switzerland. Most of these sightings were impossible to verify, but a few stood out as especially intriguing. In July 1978, a former acquaintance of Bishop's from his diplomatic days claimed she saw him in a park in Stockholm, Sweden. The woman, who had worked with Bishop in Ethiopia, said she spotted him twice in 1 week and was absolutely certain it was him. At the time, she hadn't realized he was wanted for murder and thus didn't immediately report it. By the time authorities followed up, the lead was cold. Then in January 1979, Bishop's former State Department colleague, Roy Harrell, had a bizarre encounter in a public restroom in Sorrento, Italy. Harrell later reported that he came face to face with a bearded man he recognized as Brad Bishop. He greeted him. "Hey, you're Brad Bishop, aren't you?" The man nervously replied, "Oh no," in a distinct American accent and hurried out the door. By the time Harrell processed what had happened, the stranger had vanished into the crowds. Many years went by with no confirmed sightings until September 1994, nearly 2 decades after the murders, when a former neighbor of the Bishops from Bethesda thought she saw him. She was on vacation in Basel, Switzerland, when she spotted a well-groomed man who looked exactly like William Bradford Bishop standing on a train platform just feet away. She was close enough to be sure it was him as he stepped into a car and drove off. This startling report reinvigorated the investigation, suggesting that Bishop might have successfully built a new life in Europe. Despite these tantalizing leads, Bishop remained at large. The case grew cold, but it was never closed. Over the decades, the FBI and local law enforcement continued to publicize the Bishop case periodically, hoping to jar someone's memory or conscience. The story was featured on true crime television shows like Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted, and newspapers revisited the case on major anniversaries. In April 2014, nearly 38 years after the murders, the FBI made a dramatic move to refocus attention on the case. William Bradford Bishop Jr. was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. It's a distinction reserved for the nation's worst criminals and those who pose a particular menace or elude capture. At age 77, Bishop was one of the oldest individuals ever placed on the Most Wanted list, but the Bureau emphasized the brutality of his crimes and their commitment to bring him to justice. To be able to take a hammer to your children's heads and faces while they're sleeping, it really exhibits the brutality of the crime, an FBI agent said. The FBI released a newly commissioned age-progressed bust, sculpted by forensic artists to show what Bishop might look like in his late 70s. Several variations of his appearance were circulated, with different hairstyles, a goatee, glasses, just in case he had altered his look. A reward of up to $100,000 was offered for any information leading to his capture, and CNN's The Hunt with John Walsh featured his case to reach an international audience. Tips poured in once again, but still nothing definitive. Then, 4 years later in 2018, the FBI was forced to make a decision. Brad Bishop was removed from the 10 Most Wanted list. He hadn't been caught. Rather, the Bureau needed to free up a spot for a new dangerous fugitive. Bishop, at 81 years old, simply didn't fit the desired profile of a current top 10 target. However, officials were quick to stress that this was not a closure of the case. The search for Brad Bishop was very much active. An Interpol Red Notice, which is essentially an International Wanted Persons Alert, remains in effect for Brad Bishop's arrest. Law enforcement made it clear they have not forgotten William Bradford Bishop. As of today, the Brad Bishop case lives on as one of America's most notorious unsolved family murders. Nearly 5 decades have passed since that gruesome night in 1976. If alive, Brad Bishop would be an 88-year-old man, perhaps living quietly under an assumed name, or possibly having already gone to his grave without answer for his crimes. the truth remains elusive, and the story has only grown stranger with time. Some investigators believe Brad Bishop survived for years by hiding in plain sight. In fact, in 2014, the FBI speculated that Bishop might be living a normal life in the United States, deliberately avoiding any actions, like getting arrested or fingerprinted, that would reveal his identity. Given his intelligence training, language skills, and outdoor savvy, it's conceivable he could assume new identities and blend into various communities. According to those who knew him, Bishop had the discipline and cunning to orchestrate a second life. Still others suspect a darker end. Brad Bishop was known to have suicidal tendencies, as noted in his FBI profile, leading some to wonder if he took his own life in the Smoky Mountains shortly after the murders, his remains perhaps lost to the wilderness. Over the years, investigators chased down leads that he may have died in various places. They even exhumed an unidentified body struck by a car in Alabama, hoping it was Brad Bishop, but DNA tests proved otherwise. Reports that he had died abroad in locales like Hong Kong or France were checked into and also debunked by fingerprint evidence. Time and again, the trail went nowhere. But a remarkable new chapter to the story came to light in recent years, one that Bishop himself likely never anticipated. In 2017, a woman named Kathy Gilchrist, who had been adopted at birth, decided to take a DNA test to learn about her biological parents. What she discovered was shocking. The test led her to identify William Bradford Bishop Jr. as her biological father. Kathy had been born in 1957 while Bishop was in college. In 2021, the FBI publicly confirmed that Kathy Gilchrist is indeed Bishop's daughter through DNA analysis. For Kathy Gilchrist, learning the truth about her father was devastating. Her own biological dad is an accused family annihilator who has been a fugitive for almost her entire life. Now in her mid-60s, Kathy has since written a book about her discovery. She believes that Brad Bishop may still be alive and has said there's no question in her mind that her father's skills and outdoor experience could have enabled him to survive this long on the run. He was a chameleon, she said. He changed personas as needed. If Kathy ever got the chance to meet her father face to face, she says her first questions would be, how do you live with this? How do you justify what you did? And are you a happy person now? Those questions haunt not just Kathy Gilchrist, but everyone who has followed the Brad Bishop case. How did a man once entrusted with diplomatic responsibilities and blessed with a beautiful family become a murderous fugitive? What pushed Brad Bishop to such a breaking point? And perhaps the biggest question of all, where is he today? Is Brad Bishop out there somewhere? An old man who's evaded justice, quietly reflecting on the life he destroyed? Or did his life end in some lonely exile, his crimes buried with his bones? In the absence of answers, the mystery of William Bradford Bishop lives on. The case remains officially open, and the FBI continues to solicit tips from the public. Decades have passed, but investigators have not given up hope. Until Brad Bishop is found, whether brought to justice in handcuffs or confirmed dead, his story stands as a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest threat comes from the place you'd least expect, behind the front door of a suburban home. The Bishop murders have left behind a legacy of loss and unanswered questions, making sure that this true crime saga will not be forgotten. The world is still watching and waiting for the day when the final chapter of the William Bradford Bishop Jr. story can be written.